In Britain, the widespread adoption of the call for a ceasefire now expresses the universal horror which people feel as they have witnessed the massacre in Palestine unfold. But the parliamentary motions for a ceasefire advanced by the Labour left, the SNP and so on are pro-imperialist posture. They have condemned the Palestinian resistance as terrorists and demanded unconditional ceasefire on both sides. They reject outright the right of Palestinian people to determine their own path to liberation. In the context of the occupation, the military action of the Palestinian resistance on the 7th of October was justified, while the Zionist state's campaign to terrorise and uproot the people of Gaza is a crime against humanity. To seize the moment, we must move beyond calls for a ceasefire. Our demand must be the imposition of comprehensive sanctions on the openly genocidal Zionist state. Through its arms companies, banks and media institutions, British imperialism is utterly complicit in Zionist war crimes. We must now challenge those supposedly progressive MPs to support the complete isolation of Israel by cutting off trade, financial, military and diplomatic ties. The RCG and FRFI defend the right of Palestinians to fight by any means they see necessary for national liberation. We have no right to criticise the struggles of an oppressed people, only an obligation to fight for the removal of their oppression. Long before the creation of the Israeli state, on the 15th of May 1948, a founder of Zionism, the bourgeois Theodor Herzl, said, "For Europe we shall create there in Palestine an outpost against Asia. We shall be the vanguard of the civilised world against barbarism." Herzl went on to explain that England, with her possessions in Asia, should be most interested in Zionism. The shortest route to India is by way of Palestine, and so believe in England, he said, the idea of Zionism, which is a colonial idea, should be easily understood. This then was the explicit function of those who set about building the State of Israel. The British ruling class were very quick to pick up on the significance of Zionism. So Roland Storrs, the British governor of Palestine in the 1930s, argued that a Jewish state could be for England a little Jewish Ulster in a sea of potentially hostile Arabism. The division of Ireland and the creation of Ulster was, as is well known, a means of securing British domination over Ireland as a whole. Lord Melchett, a leading capitalist and founder of the ICI, said in 1937 that the advantages to the British Empire of a Zionist state are obvious. The security of imperial interests can be better assured by a large European or Zionist population than by the few battalions that can be spared. At the same time, working class Jewish people were not so keen for British imperialism to get involved in the development of Zionism. They had been acute victims of imperialism and were the direct targets of British state racism. One of Britain's first racist immigration laws, the 1905 Aliens Act, was targeted at Jews who had to flee pogroms in Eastern Europe. Mihail Sebastian, in his book For 2,000 Years, illustrates such a difference of opinion, if you like, within the Jewish community happening in a public meeting about the future of Zionism in the 1930s. A Jewish Marxist argues that if Britain were to get involved, it would twist the needs of the Jewish diaspora to its own colonialist ends and divide the diaspora against itself along class lines. He argued instead for a socialist anti-racist approach. A right-wing Zionist, though, argues that only Britain has the strength to carve out a place for Israel in the world by force. Whilst these political divisions are still obviously present within Jewish and all communities today, the role of British imperialism in defining the character of Zionism as an outpost of Western imperialism, and therefore the fate of Palestine, cannot be denied. Conniving to partition the Middle East during the First Imperialist War, the British and French ruling classes set in to train the conquest of the region in the May 1916 Sykes-Picot Agreement. 18 months later, the infamous Balfour Declaration signalled Britain's intent to hand Palestine over to the Zionist movement, supported by the Labour Party's War Aims Memorandum in that same year. A 3-decade-long British occupation followed to implement Balfour and Sykes-Picot by force. Among its first acts were the 1921 General Census, dividing Jerusalem into separate religious quarters. While privileges were given to Zionist settlers, including vastly higher wages for Jewish workers as European capital entered the country on the side of the colonialists, and the British-based Jewish National Fund played a key role in appropriating indigenous land. Palestinians rose up against their dispossession, and from 1936 to 1939 launched a revolutionary wave of armed resistance. Britain suppressed the revolt brutally. Executions, house demolitions, internment, torture and collective punishment were implemented alongside the arming and training of the murderous Haganah and other paramilitary Jewish forces that were integrated in the Zionist state in 1948. Killing over 5,000 Palestinians and imprisoning over 5,600 in 1938 alone, British imperialism sowed the seeds of the Nakba, the catastrophe of 1948 when the Israeli state established itself with the expulsion of over 800,000 Palestinians. Having laid the groundwork for the Zionist state through military terror, British backing ensured Israel's emergence as an outpost for Western imperialism. The rise of anti-colonial Arabism brought Nasser to power in 1952 in Egypt, and his government confronted imperialism at the Suez in 1956. Zionist forces acted as reconnaissance for British and French invaders. By May 1967, the eve of the Nakba, the June Arab defeat leading to the Israeli occupation of Gaza, the West Bank and swathes of Lebanon and Syria, Britain had sold more than 330,000 Centurion tanks to the Zionist state. Britain's Tel Aviv ambassador Patrick Hancock admitted in 1960 that "We do not give the Israelis arms because they are pro-Western or because we admire their achievement. We give them arms because our interest in the Middle East is to keep the place quiet." 320,000 Palestinians were displaced in the immediate aftermath of Nasser's defeat, and over 650,000 in the years to follow. The British and US invasions of Afghanistan in 2001 and Iraq in 2003 heralded renewed military and arms collaboration between imperialist powers and the Zionist state. Arming Israel had been a priority after 1948, but now the Zionist state acted as a supplier, with colonised Palestine becoming a testing ground for imperialist warfare. Today, British arms sales to the Zionist state are made up largely of components for military vehicles and weapons. In November, Defence Secretary Grant Shapps said that outgoing sales were relatively small, amounting to £42 million in 2022. Totalling £574 million since 2008, according to Campaign Against the Arms Trade, these sales are uneven by year, with £221 million in export licences granted in 2017. Business Secretary Kemi Badenoch has refused to answer what armaments have been supplied since October 2023, but Campaign Against the Arms Trade confirms the Israeli use of F-35s in its genocidal bombardment, with 15% of their components produced in Britain. Stop Arming Israel has therefore been a popular campaign slogan in recent years. The slogan does, however, conceal collaboration and dealings in the other direction. The Zionist state exports more arms than it imports and was the 10th global arms exporter between 2017 and 2021. Israeli arms were used by British occupying forces in Afghanistan, including the Hermes drone. Housed at RAF Waddington in Lincolnshire, remote army personnel had used them to bomb Afghanistan over 200 times in the 5 years to 2012. Munitions used in the Hermes 450 were also produced by Israel. This drone was superseded by the Watchkeeper from late 2014, manufactured jointly by Elbit and Britain-based Thales. Elbit's Affinity Training Programme boasts a contract with the British Ministry of Defence worth £500 million over 18 years to train RAF pilots. In January, Armed Forces Minister James Hayapi admitted to the presence of Zionist army personnel in Britain, revealing that 9 Israeli military aircraft had landed in Britain since October. Both Elbit and Rafael are completely enmeshed in British defence system supplies. Cybersecurity has developed as a key area of joint business. At least 7 British police forces have entered into contracts for Israeli Celebrite DNA technologies, in addition to the Home Office, which has made a £45,000 payment to the company in 2018. Israeli briefcam technologies have been sold to British police forces, local councils, educational institutions and the NHS. Israeli NICE investigation systems are used by British businesses for surveillance purposes. In 2019, Air Police trialled Elbit drones as a significant arm of counter-protest strategies, while Neil Basu, then police head of counter-terrorism, appeared at an Israeli arms fair. After 1948, British backing for Zionism took on commercial means as businesses sought to profit from colonialisation of Palestine. Built on stolen agricultural land, the kibbutz was branded as a collectivist source of fruit, vegetables and textiles. Accounting for 40% of Israelis' yield by the 1970s, Jaffa oranges and Israeli-made clothing appeared on British shelves, with Marks & Spencer epitomising the Zionist tendencies of British capital. Former chair Marcus Saif wrote in 1990 that it had been Marks & Spencer's policy to encourage economic development in Israel, praising the Delta Clothing Company and its directors. Today, British supermarkets, including Marks & Spencer's, Sainsbury's and Tesco, stock Israeli dates, avocados, oranges and other items, importing over £77 million worth of Israeli agriculture annually. Britain is embroiled in the Zionist economy. According to December 2023 ONS statistics, Israel exports to Britain include mechanical generators, pharmaceutical products, fruit and vegetables, chemical cleaning products, and minerals. In 2017, Britain was Israel's primary European investment location. Bilateral trade stood at $7.2 billion in 2023. More than 300 Israeli companies operate in Britain, ranging from high-tech to finance. Underwriting this process, 2 British banks are numbered in Europe's top 6 financial backers of 51 companies working in illegal Zionist settlements. Between January 2020 and August 2023, HSBC and Barclays provided $2.48 billion to businesses whose listed activities raise particular human rights concerns, according to UN database on Israeli settlements, while Legal & General was a top 5 investor in the same companies. The latter ranges from Zionist military and chemical institutions, including Elbit, to Airbnb, Caterpillar, Puma, and other Western corporations. During the Gaza genocide, 12 British universities, including Queen Mary, Teesside, Aston, and Edge Hill, have taken up a new government offer of grants for mobility projects focused on innovation and entrepreneurial skills development, with Zionist counterparts. An open democracy investigation of 44 universities found that they had accepted £100 million in funding from arms companies over a 5-year period. They included US corporation RTX, which manufactures in Britain and supplies Zionist Iron Dome systems. Among universities claiming ethical credentials, SAWA's collaboration with Israeli embassy includes hosting fascist speakers, like former Israeli ambassador to Britain and Benjamin Netanyahu's spokesman Mark Regev in 2017, and spending pro-Palestine students in October 2023. British sporting and cultural figures have yet to mount a significant challenge to normalise fields. Scottish football teams compete with Israelis, but Celtic FC's Green Brigades have fought bans on attendees and flags to raise the banner of Palestinian freedom on world stages. In March, over 60 human rights organisations lobbied FIFA to demand Israel's suspension, citing the hypocrisy of the global football body's immediate suspension of Russia. European companies bankroll normalisation with Zionism. In March, Adidas announced $150 million worth of funding to pro-Israeli groups, including the racist Anti-Defamation League. Signed in London in March 2023, the 2030 Roadmap for UK-Israel bilateral relations promised a raft of economic and political collaboration, including a promise to promote the cooperation in the spheres of culture, arts, media, education, higher education, sports and youth. On the 11th of October, Sports Minister Hugh Robertson released a statement as the head of the British Olympic Association. "We stand by to do anything to help and support them at this difficult time." No such statement of support was issued to Palestinian sportspeople who have been injured, imprisoned, tortured and killed by the occupation, and whose blockaded facilities are used Pinochet style as sites for mass humiliation and disappearances. As with the Nakba in 1948, the present-day genocide in Gaza would be impossible without British imperialism. In November 2023, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine called for international institutions to immediately impose sanctions upon the occupation, expel it from all international bodies, boycott and internationally isolate it, and to impose the severest of sanctions against it. The time has come for us in Britain to take the side of the oppressed people of Palestine by organising to end all British collaboration with Zionism. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to take action in support of the Palestinian liberation struggle, then I'd urge you to get organised. The roots of Zionism are so clearly in British imperialism. The same imperialism that's driving up poverty, inequality and racism at home, and an imperialism that is at the same time sustained by its use of Zionism. So, while you're checking out our website and filling out the Join the RCG request, I want to leave you with this performance from school children in socialist Cuba in solidarity with the Palestinian people. Socialist Cuba has always stood with Palestine and represents a real alternative for a world free from poverty, war, genocide and competition. Free Palestine, isolate the Zionist state, sanctions now.